Last week, we took a deep dive into WTF is going on in the condo market. Today, in our second part series to that question, we are going to look at what the F is going on with the freehold market in Toronto real estate. It's certainly a very different tale than what we're seeing in the condo side of things. My name is Ralph Fox, and I'm the broker of record and co-founder of Fox Marin. And today we have the fabulous and effervescent, my partner in crime, Kori Marin, here to join us to do a deep dive once again into the freehold, this time, section of the Toronto real estate market. Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast. We are so happy to have you join us. Please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button so you can stay in tune with everything that's happening boots on the ground in the Toronto real estate market. Kori, so glad to have you here.
Ralph, that was an amazing introduction.
Oh, good. I wing these things. So I'm like, sometimes I don't even know what I'm saying, but I hope I got my point across.
You did, and you always do. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. And as you mentioned, last week we focused on the condo market, which is getting a lot of attention in the media, and a lot of people are scrutinizing it and talking about it and dissecting it. And what I get might be smart and wise for the viewership to have a little bonus color on the freehold sector. So we are going to focus today on detached homes, semi-detached, and the row house categories. Again, for our viewership here today, we are focusing on the 416, so basically central and downtown Toronto. All the data that we're pulling here comes specifically from the TRREB MLS system. We are not just making these numbers up. We are giving you the real deal data so that you can be in the know, well-informed, and make decisions that are best for you. We have a massive caveat. We are not trying to push real estate on anyone or force you to buy real estate or force you to sell real estate. We are just having a very open dialogue about what we're seeing and feeling out there in the marketplace, and sharing numbers is always an amazing way to make informed decisions about how to move forward with your assets, or if you're choosing to jump in the market with both feet or even just one toe for the time being. So with that being said, let's start and let's talk about detached houses, if that's a good place for you to start, Ralph.
That's always a good place for me to start, Kori.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for asking.
And just to be super clear, for those of you who might be super new to real estate, detached homes are exactly what they sound like. They are detached. They're not attached to anything else. They're free floating out there on their own lot. Okay, there's no walls shared with anyone else. It's your own home. Detached house is often the dream for a lot of property owners to move up the property ladder and eventually own a house that is detached, so they don't have to share their walls or their driveway or their attic or anything like that with anyone else. So this is the most expensive category when it comes to real estate in the city. And obviously the luxury market will be encapsulated here too, because the luxury sector outside of your luxury condos will be lumped in here as well. So we're going to look at 5 main segments of this marketplace. And we're going to start with sales. So sales meaning not prices, but transactions moving through the system. And we're going to take a look back over time. We're going to look at the last decade of sales so that it gives you a sort of sense of where we are today compared to where we were 10 years ago. And this might give you a little peace of mind as to where things stand in each of these different asset classes. So as you can see here in this first category, we're sharing October, from October 2015 all the way up to October of last month, 2024. These are all the Toronto detached home sales through the system, and we've lumped in all the story counts. So this is your bungalow, your 1.5 story, your 2 story, your 3 story detached properties. Everything is lumped in this one category here. And you can see when we're looking over the last decade that there's highs and lows. It ebbs and flows just like any other market asset out there. And you can see that in the month of October 2024, just last month, we had 838 transactions in this category. And we're actually up 44% versus last year at this time. That is not saying price. That's the amount of detached homes that sold compared to last year at this time, which is quite a robust number considering how much has been pushing against the real estate market. and considering that this is the most expensive asset class. So there are still buyers in this category despite the price point. This type of inventory is still moving through. Now, obviously, you can see we're not at the height of the market where we were in 2020 when we saw the most amount of transactions moving through the system. This was during the COVID era, and this is when money was dirt cheap to borrow, and we just saw an influx of transactions across all price points at that particular time period. So we're not at our height in terms of transaction, but we're certainly not at our low.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is if you look at 2022 and 2023, those were periods where we saw a significant tightening of interest rates. Now we've seen a significant movement downwards, and I think that's where you're seeing the adjustment from 2022 and 2023 to where we are sitting right now with activity in 2024. So definitely we're seeing a shift in the market in response to a change in easing in monetary policy, both by the Bank of Canada and the Fed, which affects what happens here in Canada, in the US. So that's really something to keep our eye on because it is anticipated that this trend line of monetary easing is going to continue. And if you start to look at what the 10-year average would be, we'd probably be in and around about 1,000 for October. So we're not that far off the 10-year average at this point, and we're significantly seeing an uptick from 2022 and 2023. So I find this really interesting, and it's directly correlated to interest rates, and it might give an indication as to where the market is heading in the short term.
Yeah, a beginning of a new trend line. So moving on, we're going to look at new listings coming online. So as I've mentioned in former podcasts, new listings is that new crop of fresh stuff for you to look at on your realtor.ca app or your House Sigma app, the stuff that everybody gets excited that comes to market generally on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. So the new juicy material for you to take in and absorb. And again, we're not seeing anything crazy here. And we're seeing a little bit of an uptake, new listings coming online, meaning that sellers are feeling more confident that this perhaps might be a good time for them to transact or sell. And we're actually up 12% versus last year, and we're significantly up versus October 2022, and almost creeping up to that height of the market period in 2020, as I mentioned, during the COVID era where things were very robust. So there's people looking to sell, and it looks like if you look at transactions, there are buyers out there for that category as well. On that side as well. So you're seeing transactions happening on the sales side, people coming to market, and then people are chomping through the inventory and acquiring it on the other side of that. So these are healthy numbers to see in this category. Again, knowing this is the most expensive category in Toronto.
And I think it's really interesting to look at pre-COVID, where in 2019, 2018, 2017, you're seeing an average of around 1,750 to 1,800 range of new listings. We're starting to fall back in line with the norm pre-COVID. So again, it's interesting seeing normalized inventory levels aligning with pre-COVID versus what we saw last week when we took a deep dive into the condo market, where we saw an extreme amount of inventory. Although it was tightening, which was the story, still far higher than anything we'd seen prior to COVID.
It's so weird that 2015 seems so long ago now.
Well, it was.
Well, like 10 years ago. 2015 was,
yeah.
Like you're like, oh my God, 2015 feels so long ago.
Yeah, I don't even know if did we have iPhones back then? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we did.
I think so.
Did we?
Yeah.
We
I
must
think
have.
iPhones were like 2010. I don't know. We could Google it.
Anything before COVID, I don't remember what happened at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No sense of time. All right. So moving on to the juicy stuff, the slides that everybody loves, which are prices. Taking a look at this, everyone who's listening to this on YouTube can see the graph. For those of you who are tuning in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I can share a link to the slides below if that would be helpful to you. But you're going to see obviously a trend line upward over the last decade on pricing. And the average detached home in Toronto now is hovering around that $177 million mark. In fact, we're up 4.38% versus last year. And last year was up versus the former year. So in fact, when you look at this entire visual aid here or the slide, you can see that we're actually up in prices on average 66% over the last 10 years and up 20% over the last 5 years, and only a sliver down at 0.4% versus the high in October 2021. And we're not looking at all the months in that year. We're just looking at October specifically. So I'm comparing it apples to apples. We're only down 0.4% in this category, which again, with everything that the market has been
It's unbelievable.
thrown at, I mean, this is resilience at its best to see prices holding. And in fact, you're starting to see the pattern shifting and the new trend line evolving when it comes to average detached home prices in the city. Ralph, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's amazing. Despite everything that you're reading in the media, we're almost at all-time highs with interest rates still at an accelerated level and trending downwards. To see that is pretty unbelievable. It just blows my mind. Even being in the business and transacting every day, seeing that is quite impressive.
It doesn't feel like this, to be honest.
True. That's why it's so surprising. Is it doesn't feel like we're at record prices for detached.
Well, we might not be at record prices. We're at record prices for October.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is really interesting because it doesn't feel like there's that velocity.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like there's that FOMO effect. It doesn't feel like there's lots of time to look at inventory. So yeah, to see these prices surprised me as well. So let's move on just quickly here. I just want to years. Right now, we're at an all-time high. So maybe this is referencing that sort of lack of velocity that we're referencing. And when it comes to our intuition, we are hovering around 22 days on the market. So it's taking about 29% longer to sell than last year at this time. And I think that's probably what we're feeling, is that buyers don't have a sense of urgency, and understandably why. And so I think it's just this feeling that if you don't get this house, there's going to be something else for you in the future. And buyers are certainly taking time, which is a good thing. We want you to take your time. I just want the comment section to be very clear that I'm not forcing or shoving real estate down your throat. I'm just mentioning the fact that there seems to be a little bit more time right now. I think that's going to change when we see some of these changes of the lending rules take effect, effective December 15th of this year.
And I think that'll be more dramatic in the semi-detached, especially just because of the price point. And we're going to get onto that shortly.
And then lastly, inventory is really interesting to me. So months of inventory available in this category specifically. How long would it take to sell through the detached home asset class if we were not to list one more detached house in the 416? How long would it take for that inventory to be chomped up and purchased? So you can see here, it's just so interesting. We only have 2.8 months of supply on the detached home sector, which is definitely a seller's market still. We're not even creeping into balanced market category. But what's even more interesting is that we're down 13% versus last year. And we're hovering even closer to where we were in October 2022. So inventory is starting, not quickly, it's just starting to slowly come down. And of course, we're not seeing that insane period where you can easily see this on the bar chart here in October 2020 and October 2021, where we were like 1 month, less than 1 month supply, 1.5 months of supply. And as we've talked about before on former podcasts, this is when you would list something and 3 hours later, it would be sold on a bully offer for a record smashing price, because there was absolutely nothing out there for purchasers to acquire. So
I remember right around that time period, just trying to book a showing to get into a semi-detached or a detached property. And you would have to go sometimes at like 7 a.m. to get in to see a property because they were so booked. So we're not quite there yet, but it is interesting to see a downwards movement at this point.
Yes. It was really hilarious when you would go to do your showing, and let's say your showing was from like 2:30 to 3, and then another agent had gone over their time slot and they were still in the house during your book time. And you would start having these like aggressive conversations with agents showing your
Yes.
booking on your phone and be like, this is my time slot. And you would start battling it out outside on the seller's front lawn so that you could get your buyers into the property before your time slot window was over. And so,
Wow. While you were fully masked, gloved, Purelled,
sure.
and gowned. Oh, those were the days.
Yeah, those are the good thing about those days is there's no traffic. So it was so easy to do showings because you get from one place to another because everyone was working from home. So,
and we were essential service, apparently.
All right. So I think we've covered detached. Let's do the same exercise for semi-detached, which I think, as Ralph, you mentioned, it still is a very robust category. This is one of the most popular price points. This is your graduation property. So if you've been living in a condo, your next step up for most home buyers is to move from their first condo into a semi-detached. That seems to be a very common pattern. This is still a little bit of a healthier price point for some buyers, also acknowledging that this is out of reach for a lot of people as well. Most people who are making this move for their condo to a semi-detached house either have a lot of equity in their condo and are able to make this leap, or have significant help from the bank of mom and dad. So I just want to be very clear. Most people are not capable of saving up the deposit down payment requirements for a semi-detached house, in case you're listening to this thinking, this will never be me. All right. Semi-detached houses. First, kicking off with transactions. So what is actually sold in the month of October 2024 compared to last year. So we had 263 sales in this category. We're actually, I should say, up there. So I will change that when I post this. We're actually up 36% versus last year. So more people are buying semis than they were last year at this time. And more people are buying semis versus 2022 at this time. So again, perhaps a shift in pattern. And again, likely related to interest rates. We are certainly down from the height of the insanity in that October 2020 period, but it's nice to see a little bit of uptake in this category.
And again, if you look at 2019, 2018, 260 sales versus 323, it's not that far off from pre-COVID numbers as interest rates start to come down. So something to keep your eye on as policy continues to ease.
Here, we're going to be looking at new listings coming online over the last 10 years in semi-detached. And as you can see, using Ralph's litmus test, we're seeing pre-COVID averages in terms of how many new listings are getting listed on the MLS system. And we're seeing that hovering again between 400 and 500. This means that sellers are feeling confident about listing their properties. They're feeling like they're going to get decent numbers and they're going to be able to make their next real estate move. We are about the same as we were last year at this time, but we're certainly up in terms of new listings coming online for you to potentially purchase versus October 2022. Rough.
I think you did a great job.
Oh, excellent. All right, let's look at prices, because prices is the most fun part. Again, this is very obvious to see that we are up in terms of the average price for a semi-detached over the last 10 years. In fact, if you bought a semi-detached house a decade ago, prices are up 75%. If you purchased a semi-detached home 5 years ago, prices are up 13.8%. And if you purchased a semi-detached home in the height of the insanity in 2021, prices are only slightly down, about 0.3% versus the height of this time period in this category specifically. So if you're often in bed at night worrying like, why was I the one person that bought during that time period and now I'm suffering the consequences, you're going to be just fine. And it looks like things are already springing back. And we anticipate and forecast, as Ralph mentioned earlier, that we're going to see this category get very competitive as we see the lending rules take a strong shift effective December 15th. So Ralph, you're always the best when it comes to talking about policy change. So why don't we highlight that here?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on our last podcast last week, but maybe looking at it from a slightly different light is mid-December, the federal government has changed the lending rules for for insured mortgages, meaning if you're putting less than 20% down, the cap is currently $1 million. That cap is going to be lifted from $1 million to $1.5 million. In addition to that, you will have the opportunity under this new guidelines to get a 30-year AM as opposed to the 25-year AM, which will help stretch out the payments a little more. And so why that's relevant is, as anybody who's watching this podcast knows, I'm sure, it's very difficult in central and downtown Toronto to be able to afford to buy a house for under $1 million. Well, now you could buy pretty much most semis in the city under this program. Now, this isn't for everybody because there's going to be huge carrying costs involved if you're looking at putting less than 20% down and carrying a mortgage under this program, significantly higher than if you had put 20% down and didn't have to pay the insurance premiums, etc. However, there are a lot of buyers out there, or there's enough of them out there, who may not have that down payment, but they have very strong incomes, and generally they will be couples, most likely without kids, with very little expense. And so those are the ones that these type of programs, I think, will be aimed at. And what we are expecting is that entry-level freehold home, not necessarily detached, more meaningfully semi-detached and row homes, all of a sudden opening up a whole new type of buyer. And what we're seeing in the market right now is in anticipation in that jump in demand and potential price appreciation, we're starting to see that part of the market heat up. And if you're looking for a leading indicator in the Toronto real estate market going into 2025 and in the first quarter of 2025, keep your eye on the semi-detached and keep your eye on the row homes, because that's where we expect to see the strongest price appreciation growth.
100%. And just to be clear, if you are buying a house, let's just use October's average. So October 2024, an average semi-detached house is $1.3 million. You need a 20% down payment, and that is just over $260,000. So not everybody's running around with that type of cash at their disposal. And then on top of that, you've got your land transfer taxes, which can't be rolled into your mortgage, which is a big nauseating just dump of money that you'll never get back. And nor will you ever be like, I'm so glad I paid those double land transfer taxes. And because I did, I feel like we have amazing roads and infrastructure now because I put that big chunk of change towards that. You'll never have that conversation with yourself, I guarantee. It will be really interesting to monitor these categories. And I look forward to just briefly touching on row houses as well, because they tend to hover just a little bit lesser in terms of their average pricing. And then I also just want to be very clear that this is covering a massive geography when it comes to semi-detached. So if you're looking at trendy neighborhoods where people want to be living in this type of property, like your Leslievilles, your North Riverdale, your Plater Estates, Trinity Bellwoods, Little Italy. I mean, your semi-detached are creeping much higher than these averages. And you're looking at like your 1.5s and 1.6s up into like the 1.8s, depending on the quality of the renovation and or size of the property as well. So this isn't really a palatable number to indicate what these like key downtown neighborhood expenses are like for semi-detached in this category. All right, just quickly on listing days on market. So again, we've just seen the lever pulled back in terms of how quickly things are selling or not selling as quickly in this category. So we're up about 48% versus
Kori,
last year.
did you just say lever?
Yeah.
For our viewers at home, both Kori and I, for some reason, have sore backs, which we call our levers. So it's a bit of a sore word in the Fox Marin household. So just thought I'd share that with our viewers and shout out to anybody currently suffering with back spasms or sciatica. We hear you. Sorry, just had to add that in.
I thought you were going to make fun of me for saying lever and not lever. And I was like, oh,
No.
what? That's what I thought you were going to say.
No,
That's
no,
hilarious. Oh
you
yeah.
didn't. No.
Prebax that with a little
Oh,
bit of
God.
vodka and you're
Yeah.
set. That's our way of dealing with it.
Indeed.
So things are taking a little bit longer to sell. You can see that here. And as we discuss these changes, we expect, and it'll be interesting to monitor if things start moving through the system faster as we see these changes to the lending rules. And then quickly here, months of inventory. This is always something we want you paying attention to if you want to become really educated about Toronto real estate and you're a data-driven person. Monitoring inventory is something that we would really encourage you to look at. This is always going to be the way that you can measure supply and demand. This is just comes down to basic economics right here in this graph. And as you can see, leading up into like October 2021, we had no supply in this category. We were hovering around 1 month of supply in the semi-detached category. We've creeped up. We know why. Interest rates, the cost to acquire, the cost to carry obviously went up. So you can see that things slowed down in October 2022 and October 2023, where inventory actually crept up to almost 2.5 months of supply in this category. But already we're seeing a drop. So look at last year, look at this year, and we're down 17% in inventory in this category. And I do think the next time that we look at these numbers, Ralph, on the podcast, we'll be reporting less supply in this asset class. That's my prediction for this.
I agree.
Excellent. Okay, let's move quickly on to row houses. And then just to be clear about what a row house is in compared to a semi-detached house. So when you live in a semi-detached, you share one wall with your neighbor, and then you have one wall exposed to the outside world. When you live in a row house, there's usually like 4 or 5 of them all attached together. They're super adorable, and you might have a shared wall on both the right and left-hand side of you. So your windows will only be at the front and the back. This category are your cute century row houses, and these can also include freehold townhouses. They might be newer construction that are not part of a condo corporation. So that's how we categorize this particular asset. This would be considered to be an entry level, and I'm putting quotes around that, acknowledging how expensive they are, not saying they're easily affordable for everybody. This would be considered the entry level category in the freehold market. Okay. And there's amazing opportunities in this category.
I so agree with you, Kori. They can often be so overlooked. There are some gorgeous character renovated row homes in the city, just beautiful properties. They can be a little dark, but some of them will have high ceilings that make up for that.
And skylights.
Skylights, yes. Love those skylights when they don't leak.
When they don't leak, of course. This is an exceptional category to keep your eye on, including your freehold townhouses as well. So if you're trying to creep up the property ladder and you're not quite ready for a semi, this is something I'd really love for you just to be a little bit more open-minded to, because there are some ridiculously beautiful row houses out there that you'll just be like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So we're going to follow the same pattern here. Just look at these same data points. So sales in this category are up. Again, we're hovering close to those averages. Pre-COVID, about 100 transactions in this category, and up 67% versus last year. And in fact, we're up 67% versus the year prior as well. So you can see almost double the amount of transactions that have taken place in this category when we're comparing year over year. Interesting to see that there's some zest here in rows and towns. New listings coming online. We're actually seeing a little bit more action on new listings versus pre-COVID in this category, but certainly up versus October 2022, meaning sellers are feeling confident about putting their asset on the market. Okay, prices. Let's spend a little bit of time here. So again, you're seeing the pattern or the trajectory of prices going up. That's not really surprising. We are slightly down in this category versus last year at this time, down about 6%. So your average row house townhouse hovers around the $1.25 million mark. If you bought a row house 10 years ago, prices are up 57%. And if you bought one 5 years ago, prices are up 16.7%. And if you bought one in the height of the market, which in this case, when we're comparing apples over apples, looking at October specifically, prices are down about 7% versus that height. Again, knowing this is a sweet spot in terms of prices and people trying to make this move up into the freehold category, this will be a very stimulated section of the marketplace when the market starts to turn around. So I think, again, I'm predicting that we'll be forecasting a trajectory upwards, even if it's slow off the bat, just because this is a more palatable price point for people trying to make that property ladder move.
And it's again amazing to see the price jump from pre-COVID. You're hovering in the nines, essentially, to 1,248. Pretty amazing to see that price appreciation given all that the market has had thrown at it since COVID, and all the negativity in the press. So pretty incredible to see the resiliency of the market on all levels of freehold from a price perspective. It's astounding, actually.
It's amazing to me. I remember offering on houses in bidding wars for clients in this time period pre-COVID, and thinking, oh my God, I can't believe we're offering 9 something for a row house.
Yeah.
And thinking, I feel like we're being really aggressive. We've got to come in with a 9 in front. And just having that conversation with people and kind of feeling like my solar plexus would always feel a little bit nauseous about that. And I'd be like, oh my God, what a steal. You got your house for $908,000 back in 2016. You're crushing it. So it's interesting to always reflect back to see how far we've come. Okay, these are listing days on market. We're about the same as last year in this category. Just a quick snapshot of this for you, just to see it's not like this category is all of a sudden taking off or really slowing down. We're just hovering about the same as last year. Buyers, there's still selection out there for you, and you still have time on your side. We don't expect that window to last forever. So if you are considering making a move, this may or may not be a good time for you to take a look at what's out there, especially quality inventory in this category would just be an amazing potential move for you. And then finally, let's look at this inventory number. So you can see the inventory pre-COVID was hovering about 1 month to 1.5 months, which was just ferocious, absolutely ferocious. And you can see here in the bar chart how things just crept up. In October of last year, we're at 3.1 months of supply. A lot slower market in terms of opportunities out there. And we're already down versus last year to 2.2 months of supply. So we're down almost 30% versus last year at this time. Again, a key indicator when it comes to what's happening in these categories and something for you to pay close attention to. You can ask your agent anytime about inventory. If they can't answer this question and there's a problem, they should be able to give you the amount of months of supply in your particular category of interest. This is something I want you to be really familiar with when you're making your decision about if this is a good time for you to move forward with an acquisition or not. Ralph, there's one thing I wanted to talk to you about because it came up in the comment section from last week about condos. How do you feel about the Liberal government making moves on not renewing immigration status effective 2025 and how that may or may not influence both the freehold market and the condo sector?
I think if you look at the quality of the immigration that they're looking on shutting down in terms of who potential buyers are going to be, I don't think it's going to have any effect on the buyer market, on the resale market. I do think it may have a subsidiary impact on the rental market. However, a lot of these type of new immigrants or people moving here will be students who won't be coming here. And a lot of these type of students traditionally will be in these colleges where they had these mills where they had people just coming and staying and packing them in rooms as a path to citizenship. And I don't think that that is going to be the typical person renting out a $3,000 or $2,500 condo in Liberty Village, for example. So I don't think it will have a dramatic impact on central and downtown Toronto. But I think in other smaller municipalities where they had these colleges that were just turning people through, I think the real estate will be greatly impacted in those areas. And a lot of properties that made sense will no longer make sense, especially in a higher interest rate environment. I just don't see a dramatic impact on central and downtown Toronto.
I totally agree. And I would love our viewers just to pay close attention to this specific answer, because I think the media is going to love running with this narrative and really spinning it in terms of like a fearmonger perspective in terms of the real estate market and this drawback on immigration. And I just want you to pay close attention to it and then make sure that you're looking at both sides of the story and not just running towards the fear, and really like sitting back and considering how that may or may not affect the market. And I agree. I don't really feel like it's going to affect central and downtown Toronto. Time will tell. We'll continue to report on all of these great numbers, but I'm so happy that we had a chance to take a deeper dive into freeholds today. Ralph, thank you so much for your awesome insights as always. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, or opinions, we always love to hear from you. Please try to keep it constructive as much as possible. And we will catch you on the flip side next week.
Thank you so much for joining. And please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button. I always forget to say that.
Yes, you do. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in.